for this opportunity for us to share the process that we did in Kenya. Kenya completed its first report in 2020, but we had started a year before, so it took us a full year from the beginning to the end. In terms of the process, so we evaluated 209 core indicators out of the 303. And our first process was that we established a multi-stakeholder advisory board that was drawn from industry stakeholders. We then built a collaborative research team that comprised 5 lead researchers and 5 assistant researchers. And then 2 of those lead researchers, I was one with Victor Capillo, and then we synthesized the report and edited. Then we have one more person from the University of Maryland to looking at whether the report made any sense. We then developed a research action plan that had the process: when do we collect data, when do we do the training for the researchers, and when do we present our process to the multi-stakeholder advisory board. We then went into data gathering, we then analyzed, and we did our report. Now, later, after we finished the report, we did organize a national validation multi-stakeholder workshop as part of course, affirming our research, but also it's part of what we thought or what we agreed was advocacy, one of the advocacy activities. And once we completed, we have now been going through the assessment and monitoring whether the recommendations we made have been implemented, and if not, what have been the challenges, what are the new emerging issues. Now, in terms of challenges, we noted several of them, and I'll just highlight a few. One, it was kind of difficult in accessing some of the required data, because you go to a meeting and or you go to a certain institution and they tell you they've been doing this, but when you ask for the key, the required data, it wasn't forthcoming. Then we also realized, because of lack of data, the process was taking longer than what we had agreed with UNESCO as the timeline to complete the study. And then, of course, we noticed that there was an element of cost of implementation. For example, there's data that required people to go to the field, but that, we were under-resourced. Another challenge was that we had limited government participation. They were always busy or not available for the interviews. And then it was also, initially when we started, we thought it would be easy, but there was also that challenge. Today, you're convening the multi-stakeholder advisory group. You need to convene the researchers. You need to do the validation meeting. And so that required some good planning so that we would at least do a synthesis and a successive process. So what were some of the emerging findings? In terms of, we just looked at Rome. In terms of rights, some of the laws and policies at least provide widely for human rights. However, implementation of key policies and implementation up to now still remains a challenge. On openness, access to information. We have access to information, but there's lack of standards and there's weak legislation for people to be able to access information, especially from government outfits. And then in terms of accessibility, we noted that the cost of internet, the devices, access to networks, and language barriers still exist, and there are areas we must consistently continue to have conversations and look at how this can be overcome. And then multi-stakeholderism, of course, in Kenya, the constitution does provide for public participation for anyone conducting public policy. So it's already provided for in our constitution. However, we noted there was weak engagement. There's also weak policy, framework, and we still do not have like standards for engagement. So engagement still happens, multi-stakeholder participation still happens, but it largely remains, it's sort of like ticking a box because, for example, what we have been asking is when we are asked to participate, we would want to see our recommendations reflected in final policy outcomes. And if then they are not reflected, we need at least to be told why they were not reflected, what were the reasons. And then in terms of cross-cutting issues, of course, there's a challenge of implementation of policies and laws, and there's also the capacity of relevant institutions that should do this. So that still remains a challenge. Then we did make some key recommendations, for example, that there's need, we have a lot of policies, we have a lot of laws, but they need to be implemented. Then, we need to start seeing them work. And then some institutions that are charged with implementing some of these laws and policies actually require, that institutional capacity to be able, those institutions, there's need to enhance their capacities to implement these laws. And then, of course, there's an issue of building public awareness that is very necessary when it comes to issues, of ICTs. There's still that belief that it's elitist, it doesn't touch ordinary people. And then, of course, I guess there's need to start collecting extensive and diverse data collection. So what were some of the lessons that we learned? One is that such reports are actually very important because they sort of aggregate data in one pot. So you have a one-stop shop in this report that has different sets of data, as opposed to what we do. So we will be researching on access. We have one report on access. We will be researching on multi-stakeholderism, and we will have another report on multi-stakeholderism. But this one was able, to aggregate the raw indicators in actually just one shop, so or one stop. So another lesson we learned is that it is very important to periodically conduct such studies, as they give a sense of, the ICT temperature in a country and where things are at and what needs to be done, what are the emerging issues, what requires immediate attention, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, as a team, as the KICTANET team, we tested on how to work collaboratively. Like I raised, we had 5 lead researchers and 5 assistant researchers, and each team worked on a different indicator, and then we had to synthesize all this information. And finally, I want to say, since we completed our report in 2022, there are already 2 years that have passed by, and It was actually early 2022. So we're actually reviewing what has happened in the last 2 years in terms of implementation, what has been enforced, what has been implemented, what needs attention, what are the new emerging issues in those 2 areas. And we hope to complete this second assessment in October this year. And I want to end that and thanks IPESA for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for that insight, Grace. We look forward to what is going to come out of this review process, and are excited about what you have managed to accomplish thus far in Kenya with regards to the assessment. And yes, well done on that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much.